Alright, here we are on the last lesson for this packet, lesson 15, dividing decimals by a decimal now. So we're going to skip number 1 because that's kind of what we've been doing. So we're going to go on to number 2, and now we have 3.7615 divided by 0.05. So I'm going to write it out as my setup first. 7615, and then here's my 0.05. Alright, so we don't want to divide decimals by a decimal. And we have the power to change that, our special math powers. We want to get rid of this decimal over here. So we want to make 0.05 a whole number. So that means that we would really like to move this decimal over 2 places. And if you remember when we talked about percents, that would kind of be the same thing as multiplying by 100. So I can't just multiply 0.05 by 100. I have to multiply the entire thing by 100. So now if I'm going to rewrite this, leave some space here now, I'm going to move this decimal 2 places to the right as well. So I would have 376.15 now divided by 5. Now I bring up that decimal point just like I've always had to, and now I'm back to what we did in the last lesson. So I know that 0 groups of 5 go into 3, so I'm going to look at 37 instead. And I know 7 whole groups of 5 go into 37, so I'll subtract 35. I'm left with 2, and I bring down the 6. 5 whole groups of 5 go into 26. I subtract 25. I'm left with 1. I bring down this 1. And I know that 2 whole groups of 5 go into 11, so I subtract 10, and I'm left with 1. I bring down the 5, and I know 3 whole groups of 5 go into 15. So if I subtract 15, I'm left with 0. So that means that my answer would be 75.23. Okay, so once we move that decimal around, then it's just like what we've been doing. So let's look at number 3 here. We have 22.5 divided by 0.15. So first I'm going to write it out like I normally would. Alright, and again, I want to move this over 2 places, which is the same thing as multiplying by 100. So now if I were to rewrite it, on the inside here, I would have 22. And now if I move this over 2 places, I'm going to have to add a 0, which is perfectly fine. So this would be 5, 0, and then my decimal would be there. And then this would be 15. So again, bring up that decimal. It's the first thing you always want to do. And now I'm asking how many groups of 15 go into 22, which I know is only 1. So if I subtract 15, I am left with 7. I bring down the 5. And I know that 5 whole groups of 15 go into 75. I subtract 75. I'm left with 0. I still have to bring this 0 down because of that decimal. And I know 0 groups of 15 go into 0, so subtract 0. I have 0 on the bottom, nothing up top, so my final answer here is just 150. Okay, I'm going to take a look at number 4. I'm going to erase a little bit just so I have some more room here to think. So now number 4, I'm going to set it up first as I normally would. 0.56782, 0.003. So now I want to move this decimal over 1, 2, 3 times. So instead of multiplying by 100, I'm now going to multiply by 1,000. So I'm going to move this decimal over 1, 2, 3 times. So when I go to rewrite it, I'll have 3 on the outside, and on the inside I will now have 567.82. Bring up that decimal. So now how many groups of 3 go into 50, or how many groups of 3 go into 5 actually, which is 1. Minus 3, I'm left with 2, bring down the 6. I know that 8 whole groups of 3 go into 26, so I subtract 24. I'm left with 2, and I bring down the 7. I know that 9 whole groups of 3 go into 27. I subtract 27. I'm left with 0. Bring down the 8. And now I know that 2 whole groups of 3 go into 8. I subtract 6. I'm left with 2. I bring down this 2. Scroll down a little bit. And I know that, let's see, I'm on 22. I know that 7 whole groups of 3, oh no, I think I missed someone here. Oh, I wrote the 2 in the wrong spot. That's fine. Erase this 2 up top. Don't need it yet. I know that 7 whole groups of 3 go into 22. So I'm going to subtract 21. I'm left with 1. So I'm going to have to add a 0 and bring it down. And I know that 3 whole groups of 3 go into 10. So I subtract 9. I'm left with 1. I bring down another 0. So if you look at this, you can kind of see that I would continue to get 3 here. So that means that my answer is a repeating decimal. So my final answer would be 189.27 and then 3 with the repeating bar up above. And I know you're probably all wondering, how can I tell how many do I have to do to know that it'll be repeating? Usually if you do 2 numbers and they're the same, and you look at the next one and you know it's going to be the same, then you are good to go. You don't have to keep going on and on about it. Alright, so that's number 4. Number 5, here's the last one that we're going to do all together. So if I write it down first, my normal setup, I'm going to need more room. I need myself enough room here. There we go. Alright, now if I look at it, normal setup, 3. Okay, so now if I look at this decimal, I need to move it 1, 2, 3, 4 places this time. So that means I'm going to multiply the whole thing by 10,000. Alright, so now if I go to rewrite this, so I know I'm just going to have 4 on the outside, which is what I wanted. And I'm going to have to add some zeros. So I have 1, 6, 7. So now I'd have 2 and 4, which would only give me 2 decimal places. So I need to add 2 zeros to get to that 4th decimal place that I moved. And I bring up my decimal. So now I just go through as I normally would. I know that 4 whole groups of 4 go into 16. I subtract 16, I get 0. I bring down the 7. 1 group of 4 goes into 7. I subtract 4, I'm left with 3. I bring down my 2. 8 whole groups of 4 go into 32, so I subtract 32 and I get 0. Bring down the 4. 1 group of 4 goes into 4, so I subtract 4 and I'm left with 0. So now I do have to keep bringing down these zeros, but you know that 0 groups will go in. So I'm just going to fill in these last 2 places with 0, but you do have to fill them in because of that decimal. You cannot just leave it as 4,181. So my final answer would be 4, 1, 8, 1, and 2 zeros. So that would be 418,100. Alright, for this last one, number 6, I want you to try on your own. I will tell you that you should get a repeating decimal as your answer, and we will go over it in class.